mean, some folks may have seen the Globe and Mail today. There's actually an article by Margaret Wente that talks about this. That I couldn't agree. I couldn't disagree with more profoundly. You know, first of all, when we talk about the environment or the environmental debate, we're talking about this huge, ungainly thing. That's, you know, if you look at this Green Living Show, this phenomenal Green Living Show, I mean, you see it arrayed here, right? We're talking about everything from organic food and food consumption patterns to energy policy and energy, you know, the relative merits of different kind of energy. We're talking about green consumerism. I mean, the environmental debate's a very broad thing. So I think in order to find a solution, we need to be clear what we're talking about. We need to be clear what the problem is. And you know, I don't agree that the environmental debate is in trouble in this country. I mean, the 30,000 people that'll stream through here over the next couple of days are testament to the fact that a lot of people in Canada, most Canadians, care passionately about the environment. And by many measures, environmentalism is gaining ground. Organic food consumption is way up. Local food consumption is way up. More people than ever before are buying non-toxic products. Municipalities across this country are doing phenomenal things in terms of public transit and everything. At a provincial level, here in Ontario, we're building solar panels and windmills, and we're gaining real ground provincially in many parts of Canada. The place where we are stuck is federal policy, federal energy policy, and we're stuck under this government. And, you know, I don't think that what's in this budget has got the media attention it deserves. Somehow, I think this budget has got a bit of a pass from the media. And if you just go back to Matthew's comments about the fact that our federal government at the moment is putting all of its eggs, putting all of our eggs in resource extraction, in the resource extraction basket, that's a dangerous thing to do. I mean, where is the manufacturing? Where's the support for manufacturing in Ontario and Quebec? Where's the support for other industries? It's not there. And there's a real crackdown, an attempt to undermine organizations that criticize in a way that's really inappropriate. So the way that we've got here is that at a federal level, we haven't been able to put the pieces together to have a progressive energy policy. But in many other parts of this country, we're doing very well, and we need to acknowledge that.
Okay. And by the way, as we get into this, if anyone wants to respond at the end, just let me know, and you know, you can talk. We can open it up. Toby, you guys work on promoting clean capitalism, and there's a big part of the corporate world in Canada and around the world who buy into the concept of clean capitalism. And in Canada, even some of the big resource companies, and the one that has always struck me, Suncor, has come out in favor of carbon pricing. They've done things that you don't expect a big oil company to do. So the corporate sector, at least a chunk of it, seems to buy this. Why is it having such a hard time getting purchased with the federal government? An idea that even their own constituents in the resource industry already accept.
Yeah, and I mean, it's an interesting point. There's been a lot of phenomenal work going on behind the scenes with Corporate Canada, particularly in the oil patch, some of it led by Sustainable Prosperity, around discussion of creating a carbon tax in Canada, which is now widely endorsed in private by the CEOs of the major oil companies in Canada. They're good with the idea of a carbon tax in that $25 to $30 range, with the idea that the money stays in jurisdiction, so if it gets collected in Alberta, it stays in Alberta. So you have the biggest oil companies in Canada are in favor of something like this, and many of them now, they do their projects and they plan. Their projects are 40 years, so they do a shadow price on carbon to see how it impacts, whether it's in Canada or it's Statoil or it's Suncor. They all have shadow prices of carbon. But at some point, they take a look at that and what technologies they're going to use, and there's a cost-benefit calculation. And at some point, when they see what the budget comes down and carbon is not mentioned, there's no pricing of it anywhere, it gets to be something that gets pushed forward, and maybe it's not going to happen. For sure, not going to happen in the next couple of years, but then it gets to be something that might not happen for the next 5 or 6 years. And then that's beyond the time horizon for most analysts and most investment sort of analyst considerations, and it really takes the wind out of the sails. So corporate Canada is ready to deal with the carbon tax. The people who are going to get hit hardest are ready to deal with the carbon tax. They may come out and they may be not as constructive at the time when it actually gets real, as they are in the cozy discussions that go on. But when you have a company like Imperial Oil, who says, their chairman says, I'm good with the carbon tax, $25 to $30 with the money staying in jurisdiction, that's a really interesting conversation, and the government is taking the wind out of the sails into that conversation with this kind of a budget.
Can I just add to that? I mean, I totally agree with what Toby said, that the wind is out of the sails, but it's even worse than that. I mean, the government is basically to just ruin everyone who actually speaks up in favor of a carbon tax. They eliminated the National Roundtable on Environment and Economy, and those people were very strong supporters of carbon pricing, and a very informed and thoughtful group, and not a bunch of foreign-funded radicals like Rick. So I am too. I'm proud to be a foreign-funded radical. But they're in a sense they're deliberately trying to eliminate the environmental policy-making capacity of the federal government. They don't. I think the Prime Minister just doesn't. He's got his hands over his ears when it comes to the word climate or carbon or sustainability. Try to find the word sustainability in the current budget. Try to find a speech of a federal minister in which the word sustainability has been used. I haven't found one for 4 or 5 years.
Yeah, okay. Mark, I want to get into the CRA component of this. So this has been commented on that the budget gave direction and money to the Canada Revenue Agency, and it seemed to give direction to the Canada Revenue Agency to look at the practices of environmental charitable organizations. And the Globe and Mail, if I remember correctly, said it was, or called it a witch hunt. Basically, that was the word that was in the Globe and Mail editorial. I want to ask 2 questions. One, is this a witch hunt? And can you all? I also want you to clarify some of the key issues that the 10% advocacy limit and the foreign funding question. If you could just put a little detail around what's been asked.
Well, first of all, let's start off with what can Canadian charities do in the political realm. Many Canadians think that charities are not allowed to touch political. That's what they think, and they're wrong. Charities are allowed to do certain types of political activities, allowable political activities. They aren't allowed to get involved in partisan political activities. So you can't say as a charity, vote for this party, or don't vote for that party. However, there are a lot of things in the political realm that charities can get involved with. The general rule is it has to be related to their objects, their legal objects. So if you're an environmental charity, you can deal with environmental issues. But if you're in a group that's dealing with something completely different, you shouldn't start getting involved in just general political matters. So it has to be related to your objects, and it also has to be capped at about 10% of resources, which includes time, effort, energy, money, all that sort of stuff, okay? And one can talk about, exactly where these lines fit, but that's the general rule. And for a charity that just wants to get into political, they can also average over the past 3 years. So if they haven't been involved in 1 year, they could end up spending 30% on political. So, and really small charities under 200,000 in revenue can spend more than 10%. They can spend up to even 20%. So there's a lot of room for charities to spend money on political activities. And if you look at the T3010, which is what the charities have to file every single year, 500 out of the 86,000 charities say that they do political activities. 500 out of 86,000, which is less than 1%. Now here's the thing. Imagine Canada, which is an organization that represents charities, did a survey. They sent out 3,200 questionnaires, and 1,600 of them came back. And the responses of those 1,600 were 39% of them do political activities. Okay? So what it says to me is that your average charity doesn't know what a political activity is, and they're putting no, we don't do political activities on it, when in fact they are doing political activities. And I mean, Rick, in your T3010, you've said every year you do political activities, right? So on that, I would commend you guys, because you're saying you're doing it. Other charities are doing political activities and they're not saying they're doing it. This is not to criticize environmental charities, because I think it's minor, the environmental issues of non-compliance in my mind compared to some of the other charities, because there's 40,000 churches, synagogues and mosques, many of whom are involved with political, saying they don't do political activities. In fact, some of them are doing partisan political activities, which is completely inappropriate, and in my mind, the CRA, just like with other areas of non-compliance, should tell those charities they shouldn't do that sort of work, okay? So there are a lot more charities that are doing political, they just don't even know that it is, and they don't know what the rules are and the bounds. We don't know yet how much of that money that the government has allocated is going to be spent on audits, education, and how much of it's going to be targeted to environmental charities or other things. The point I was making earlier in our earlier discussion was that if you see organizations, because a lot of it is a complaints-driven process, if you see people doing things that are inappropriate in terms of political activities, say a think tank is doing something that's inappropriate, anyone can write to the CRA and they will take a look at it and they may end up auditing that charity. If the only people who write to the CRA are people focused on environmental charities, then I expect there will be emphasis on environmental charities. But if people write to CRA to talk about other charities that are doing things that are inappropriate, I expect that CRA would deal with those charities as well.
But let me just ask a follow-up question. Don't you